What's your lemonade stand story?
And he was like, YouTube's going to be the next big thing, Devin. Like, you need to get on that. You need to get on it early. And I'm like,
And all of us, we all go through our own trials, our own level of stuff.
Sure hope this works out. Otherwise, this will be a huge waste of time.
I mean, what else is it all about other than just taking risks and continuing to try and grow and hopefully get better and better at making things?
Most of the billion-dollar brands you've seen were started by people that were just solving a problem for themselves.
We're telling lemonade stand stories from some of the world's top creators, makers, and go-getters.
We're rolling right now.
Hey,
We're having fun. We're rolling.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this podcast today is sponsored by Yalla, a task management and team collaboration software that we use at Lemonade Stand. We use Yalla to keep all of our team members organized, wherever they are. In fact, we used it to plan and organize this podcast. Visit yalla.team, that's YALLA.team, and try it for free. We also have a special offer for all listeners of this podcast. Use promo code LEMONADE and get a lifetime 25% off if you upgrade. What is going on, guys? This is Charan Prabhakar with the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast, and today I am here with Mr. Mark Sanborn. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here. You are a fantastic author, an entrepreneur, a speaker, although we both were discussing how the speaking career has kind of took a little bit of a crash dive with COVID, stopping all events from happening. So now it's like, all right, we gotta pivot a little bit and maybe speak virtually or whatnot. But Mark is known for writing a lot of books, but the most popular, I believe, that came out is The Fred Factor. And we as a company all read it, and it was awesome. Mark, here's the thing. Like, when I was reading it, the first thought I had was thinking about a woman by the name of Camille. And Camille was my Fred. And she helped me out so much last year. I remember I had surgery, and the insurance wasn't going to cover it after they said that they were. And she worked for the insurance company, and she went above and beyond, like, just to make sure that everything would be taken care of. And even when things didn't go the way we wanted it to initially, she even told me the night before she had to call me to tell me, like, bad news. She even drank herself a little bit because she was, like, so sad that she had to give me, like, some sad news. But she was just above and beyond, right? So I remember thinking about Camille. But then I also thought about someone that was a DERF, right? Like someone that's the opposite of a Fred, that gave just not good customer service at all. And I still remember that, even though that was like 15 something years ago. And then I started thinking about myself and how I did customer service back in the day. And I'm like, was I a Fred or was I a DERF that day? You know? And so it got me thinking about a lot of different things. But yeah, Mark, thank you so much for being on here and for sharing your talents with us. And I would love to hear more about how the Fred Factor came to be.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of Lemonade Stand because you've all embraced my book. And I do very few podcasts. That's a different conversation for a different day. But I do love to communicate in whatever medium. And as you said, most of my last 35, 36 years being self-employed, I was in front of anywhere from 50 to 90 audiences a year. And let's just say that number dropped dramatically in 2020, but gratefully is inching back up now at the end of 2021 and beginning of 2022. Well, Fred is based on a real live person named Fred Shea, a postal carrier. And needless to say, he did such an incredible job of delivering the mail, which frankly is a pretty simple job. We're not talking rocket science, to use an old cliche, that I noted it and started talking about it in my speeches and seminars, and it eventually became a book. By the way, if anybody wants to read the first chapter for free, just go to fredfactor.com. And there's a post there called The First Fred I Ever Met. It's literally the first chapter out of the book. But basically the big message of the Fred Factor, and you've alluded to it, is that nobody can prevent you from choosing to be extraordinary. You know, we weren't all taught that. That's why Fred once said to me, he said, Mark, doesn't everybody do their job this way? I said, well, if they did, nobody would write the book, right? It'd be old news. The reality is I think most people are kind of, by design or default, more likely, unintentionally, they're kind of sleepwalking through their work, right? They look at what they do every day as obligatory, and they look at the evenings as their opportunity to enjoy their lives. Well, that's a whole lot of your life that disappears into obligation unless you can figure out a way to take the job you have. And it's not the job you have, it's how you do it. That's what matters. And, you know, I think that you alluded to two kinds of Fred. Fred Shea, or Fred the Postman, as I wrote about in the book, we became friends because when I was in town, I'd often see him delivering the mail. I mean, we had an ongoing relationship. And I think one of the mistakes that people make is they think, well, my customers, I only interact with them briefly or infrequently. I could never do that. But there's something more than an interaction, even though it's not a full-blown relationship, and that's a connection. And a connection is when, for a moment, you have this shared affinity where you recognize in someone else something you recognize in yourself. We all like people who we think are like us, right? And when we make those connections, it takes somewhere around 5 or 6 connections to start to build a relationship. So one of the points of being a Fred is just for the short time you're interacting with people, be engaged. And I use a phrase in the book that kind of encapsulates a lot, and that is ABCD. See if you can go above and beyond the call of duty. Because that sounds like what Camille did. Although I like the idea that she got sad and had a couple cocktails. I've just broadened my repertoire of how I too can be a better Fred when I'm offering empathy. But you know, she took an interest in you, and I think what people don't understand is everybody makes a difference. That's a big theme of the book. The only question is what kind. There is no neutrality, because if you try to be neutral, people think you're indifferent. And indifference is a deal killer, right? But I'd rather you argue with me. At least I have your attention, right? Indifference says you aren't even important enough to ignore. You know, I mean, it's a real dead end street for any business. And the bottom line, and then I'll go back to some more specific questions that you have. The bottom line is we're going 100 miles an hour with our hair on fire, right? I mean, we're all living these super paced lives, and we're taught sometimes inadvertently that being busy is the goal. No, being productive is the goal. And ironically, sometimes the less busy you become, the more productive you become, because you stop doing the stuff that's just inane and low priority and has low payoff. So I think ultimately being a Fred is about choosing to make a positive difference every day when it's important and when you can.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because to the example that wasn't a Fred for me, I remember I was ordering some equipment, like some camera equipment back in 2005. And, you know, this was expensive equipment, and it was kind of like my graduation present for graduating college, right? And so I was very excited about it. And I remembered the guy on the other end, the customer service people, like they just didn't even seem to care. You know, they just didn't even seem to care. And I felt like I was like just going down this long path. And it made me think, because there was another company offering the same equipment, but it was a little bit more expensive. I was like, I would have gone with the other company. I would have paid more money for better customer service than having such poor experiences with this particular thing. Now, there was a part in the book that I really like. I mean, I don't know why this like touched me so much, but it really did, was when you connected with the busboy and you helped him feel better about himself doing what he was doing, which was kind of a mundane job, right? Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, well, I tell the story. It was actually about my friend Jim Cathcart, who was in the Atlanta airport. And, you know, there's this young guy cleaning off tables in the food court, and he's not looking like it necessarily has a high level of self-esteem or importance. He's disheveled, his hat's on crooked. And when Jim, my friend Jim, finished eating, he walked up to the young man, tapped him on the shoulder, which, of course, kind of freaked him out, probably because most of the time when people interact with him, you know, it's to complain about. It's
like to insult him. Yeah,
not being clean or to criticize him. And Jim just said, you know, I want to say thank you because you do important work. And of course, now the guy's confused because he's not used to this. And Jim went on to explain. He said, you know, thousands of people pass through this airport, and how clean the food court is, that makes a difference on how they perceive the airport and what they think of the city. And I just want you to know you do important work. Thank you. And, you know, as Jim walked away, the young guy was standing a little straighter and you know, had a little more dignity. And I think that's important to realize, is that work doesn't give you dignity. You give your work dignity. BC Ford
Yeah.
said there's more satisfaction in being a first-rate truck driver than a 10th-rate executive. And I agree, because I'm less interested in what the job someone has is than I am about the commitment and the skill and the artistry they bring to their craft. And one of the reasons I think the Fred Factor sold so many copies was because it wasn't about Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Steve Jobs. Because you look at those guys, you go, well, they can do anything. They've got more money than all of us combined, right?
Yeah.
Fred has a blue-gray bag and a uniform. Now, he is retired. He retired a few years ago. But, I mean, when he was delivering the mail, he didn't exactly have a repertoire of equipment or resources to do amazing work with. But, another principle in the book, you got to outthink rather than outspend your problems.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I think about Fred in your book, I think there is a man that's truly alive, and he finds meaning in what he's been given. It's interesting because you made a mention about doing something that you feel like you're kind of obligated to do. And when you're obligated to do it, you're like not necessarily going to be a Fred. You're like, I just got to check in my hours and make sure that I get the work done and then go home. But someone that is a Fred kind of comes alive and becomes very present. Now, you also made mention about something that I thought was very interesting. You said like people come in, they're like half asleep when they're working, right? They're just kind of going in like zombies and doing their thing. I saw the exact same thing happen when I was Christmas shopping, and I saw crowds of people in Target, eyes like half closed, like just like zombified walking, right? They're not truly alive. So let me ask you, what makes someone come truly alive? What makes someone a Fred? Because to me, it's like, you can't really you can talk about it. It's this beautiful thing, but people have to choose to be a Fred versus not being a Fred, right?
Well, Sharon, you made a good point, and it was Einstein who said, love is a better master than duty. When we do it out of duty, we're, compelled or, we don't feel like good about when we do it because we want to do it. And people say, can you make somebody be a Fred? When my boys lived at home, I couldn't make them take out the garbage. So I'm not a big fan of making anybody do anything, right? I think you can incentivize and you can reward and you can encourage, but ultimately being Fred-like. And I know, the language is silly, although that actually is Fred Shea's name. And, you could write a book called The Camille Concept, just to kind of extend the alliteration thing. But ultimately, I think it begins with awareness. I think a lot of people, one of two things happen. Either they didn't see how what they did made a difference. They didn't have teachers or parents that noticed and helped create that sense of value. Or it's even worse when they used to do that and they were criticized or, condemned or put down for it. I had a wait person at one of the top restaurants in the United States where I spoke many, many years ago. And she came up afterwards and she said, I loved what you said, and that's me. But when I do that, all the other people say, you're making us look bad. Don't work so hard. Don't be so good. And I said, well, boy, you've got a real dilemma, because you either let the other mediocre people that are around you set your thermostat, or you say, I'm not doing it to make you look bad. I'm doing it because this is the way I want to do it. And I think so often we get pressured to conform, and regrettably, in some organizations, mediocrity is the norm. So when you stand out like that, you do attract some criticism. And by the way, I want to be really clear. Being a Fred isn't about letting people take advantage of you. Every once in a while, I will get a note or an email or a phone call, and somebody says, people just take advantage of me because I'm so helpful. No, you still got to have boundaries. If you're in a way, if you're doing it because to please people, you're still missing the point. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And really, the reality is you won't be recognized for a lot of the good work you do. And it's a funny thing. I don't know if I've talked about the book for so long, I'm not always sure what I wrote about and what I talk about. But I always say that if you do something for the overt purpose of getting a reward or a promotion or recognition, you'll probably be disappointed. You might, but the problem is if you do it for those reasons and you don't get those things, then you're disappointed. If you just do it because you say, what, this is fun. It really is. And there's probably a small percentage of people that being of greater service isn't fun for them. And, then they need to find a different path. But for most people, genuinely helping someone else, not, giving them, $100 bill or inviting them to live in your basement. I mean, those are big acts of generosity, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But there's so many little things that we can do every day, just little, and that's a big message of the book, is little things make a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you hit something that I thought was like so fascinating, because I remember reading this in the book, where it's like if you're seeking the attention of like what a Fred would have, then you're not going to be a Fred, because a Fred doesn't really seek their own attention. They go and do good just for the sake of doing good, because doing good is its own reward. And then anything external that happens is maybe a side bonus.
Icing on the cake, right? It's
icing on the cake.
Fred worked for the Postal Service for 27 years before the book came out, and as far as I know, he was never recognized for his good work. In other words, he kind of labored in obscurity, but it didn't discourage him. And it was just kind of cool that I could play a small role in the attention that then came when the book came out.
No, it's incredible, because it's like those that are unrecognized for their acts of service, they just kind of quietly go about doing it every single day. Those are the Freds, and it's sad, because like they may not get recognized in this life at all, but yet when you're in that act of service, you're just having a good time. You're being kind, and it's awesome. Like a couple examples just came to me. I have a sixth grade teacher. My sixth grade teacher, Mr. Shane Rowley, made learning so much fun. I mean, I remember just going to his class every single day, just excited to learn, because he was just such a fun guy. And sometimes he would like let us play in recess for far too long. But the thing was, I remember going to class every single day, having just the best time, because I knew for sure he would make learning so great. Well, the funny thing is, he is still in my life, and I'm 40 now. We still text. We just texted each other the other day just to see how we're doing, and just go, "Hey, let's go get lunch sometime." It was sixth grade. I wasn't even 10, or I was 11 or something like that. Now I'm 40. So it's amazing the impact that one man's service had. It's a lifetime of interaction and positivity. So I think it's just such a beautiful way to go. Let me ask you this, Mark. I know we kind of, we want to wrap things up a little bit sooner than before. I want to ask you, how have you been Fred in your own life? Like, what are some things that you've done for yourself to bring about those Fred-like qualities in yourself and empower other people to live Fred-like?
One of the great things about writing books and giving speeches is I remind myself on a regular basis, and I become the beneficiary of positive dissonance, which is to say that if I talk about it and don't do it, it creates such guilt that it in a good way compels me to do it.
Right.
I just am grateful that I have the reminder. Every time I stand in front of an audience, I give the speech to the audience, but in some ways I give the speech as much for me, because if I'm really going to preach that or teach that, I really need to practice it, or else I'm a poser. Especially it's true for all generations, but younger generations, they don't tolerate inauthenticity. They don't like the unreal or the inauthentic. The other thing I do is I look for opportunities. I when I talk to audiences, the favorite simple technique I teach is called the one-a-day principle. And it says, you can't do an amazing job for everybody every day. You'd run out of time. You'd be burnt out. You don't have enough time or money, right? So do a good job for everybody, but make it a point to find at least one person a day you can do something really cool for. Now, some days you won't have that opportunity, or you won't be able to see it. But when you start looking for those opportunities, then they become apparent because they're on your radar. I want to say it was Pluto, one of the planets, and it might have been Pluto. They discovered back in the early 1920s, if I remember the story correctly, and if there's an astronomer listening, they could get it right. But what happened is, once they discovered the planet, they went and they looked at the photographic plates, and it had been there for years and years and years, but nobody saw it. The reason they didn't see it, they weren't looking for it. So people say to me, I don't see any opportunities to be of service in the ways that you talk about. Well, are you looking for it? Because without that awareness, it goes unobserved. I'll tell you a bad story about myself, because I don't like self-aggrandizement. But I was getting off an airplane, which is something I do on a fairly regular basis. And there was a young woman in front of me who was, one of the airport employees that pushed the wheelchair, and she had a person in her wheelchair. And, on jetways where they come together, there's like a steel strip, kind of a little ledge.
Yeah.
And she was struggling, getting the wheelchair over the ledge. And I remember thinking, I'm in my self-absorbed mode, why not? If this is your job, you can't get people over the ledge. And I was in a hurry, so I tried to go. I said, "Excuse me." And the guy behind me says, "Let me help." Wow, that was the greatest object lesson in my own self-absorption, because I looked at it as an obligation. How do I get around this person? Why can't they push the wheelchair? The guy behind me said, it didn't take him any more time to help. And so that I've thought of that story often as obviously there's no honor in that story, but at least there was a lesson in it. I'll say, even when you make a mistake and goof up, there's always a lesson. And if you learn the lesson, it's not a complete failure. And I learned that we often see obstacles instead of opportunities, or impediments instead of a chance to be of greater service. So if we start looking, find that one person. It could be a vendor, could be a customer, could be a colleague, could be your spouse, could be your son. Just go a little above and beyond the call of duty and see if you can't do something that'll make them smile. Maybe even at dinner say, "You won't believe what happened today."
It's so interesting you say that. It's amazing the ripple effect that happens when you go out and you do good. Even if you don't intend for it to be anything other than just, hey, I just want to do some good for the day. I remember I was with my friend Marique, and we were into Chick-fil-A, and I went in the drive-thru, and then I went again because we're like, oh my gosh, when do you get another frosted lemonade shake or something? So I went in there, and we were like joking around, and instantly the guy that I was joking with was like, "Hey, you know what? This is on us today." I'm like, "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" But they gave me this drink for free. Now, the very next time I went to Chick-fil-A was months later at a totally different Chick-fil-A. Same thing. We were just kind of like joking around with the people that were ordering food for us or whatnot, and they're like, "Hey, you know what? Food's on us today." And I'm like, "What? This is crazy to me." But they just honor like that good customer interaction, right? And again, I wasn't expecting anything like that, but I just thought it was like so incredibly surprising and amazing. But I think it's really interesting what happens when you go in and, like, you said something that I really liked a lot. You talked about how interaction sometimes can be obligational or it can be an opportunity. And I love it when you face an interaction and you think, okay, how can I turn this into an opportunity versus an obligation? And like, what a difference just that question could make in your own life.
Exactly. Well, there was a time when I was building my business, I was almost fried. I mean, I was burnt out, and when the phone rang, I didn't want to answer it. I wanted to smash it. And so and this is so long ago that I just put a little Post-it over my phone, and it said obligation or opportunity, because I realized I could reframe it just like you said. And that is, this is an opportunity to network or connect or be of service or learn or encourage somebody. And when you frame it, it's the same life. We all have the same problems, the same choices. But when you frame it differently, it makes a dramatic difference. That what you're talking about is the law of social reciprocity. We like to do things for people who do things for us. The candy stores are famous for that. We think it's cool when they pass out the free candy. What we don't realize is now you feel like a chump if you leave and you don't buy something. So they give you a piece of candy, or, "Oh, this is delicious," and you're like, "Oh, damn it, now I got to go buy. I got to buy a bag of candy because." And so I don't ever suggest using that as some kind of a manipulative construct, but it is good to know that we are kind of wired to respond positively to people who make us feel good, and vice versa.
Right. It's exactly. And the thing is it's like if you go in with the intention, I think it really always goes back to intention. Because if you're going with the intention of like, oh, I want this to be a conditional experience, like I'm going to do this for this person, but I expect something positive to happen in return, then you're kind of leading on outcomes again, and it may or may not work. And even if that outcome happened, you still may not be as happy. But I look at the Fred in your book and think, you know what? This is a man who just loved people. Yeah. He just loved people. and he really wanted, through the means of being a postal service worker, to show forth that he loved people and wanted to take care of them. And I'm like, that is just something so genuine and so pure, and not something that's like, oh, I want to do this so I can get some sort of attention. Because like you said, 27 years, he never had any attention, right? So,
well, I call it the three loves. You got to love what you do, and you love it not when it's easy, but when it's hard. You enjoy it when it's easy, but you really love it when it's hard. And you have to do something for a while before you figure that out. Like I said, we enjoy it when it's easy, but when you retire and you look back, what you really loved was this difficult stuff you were able to overcome. So the first love is loving what you do. The second one is loving who you do it with. And, diversity and differences, they can all blend together to create a greater outcome. But there is one thing that everybody's got to share, and that is a commitment to the customer or to the client. Because if you've got somebody on your team, even if you like them and agree with them, but they're just not as committed to the customer, the customer or the client as you are, that's the real deal breaker to me in an organization. And so you do better when you choose to love who you work with. And of course, finally, the final love is to love who you do it for, because they've chosen you. Of all the service providers, of all the stores, of all the teachers or doctors, they've said, you know what, I'm going to trust a part of my life to you. And that's a good reason to love them. And that's the three loves that makes you a Fred. You love what you do, you love who you do it with, and you love who you do it for.
I love that. That's a beautiful way to wrap up the Fred Factor. I think that's awesome. We have a few more minutes, Mark. I wanted to ask you just some, I guess, personal questions.
Sure.
What brings you joy right now?
Well, it's real gratifying. A lot of times as a speaker or an author, you really don't know the impact you've had on others. And so whenever I hear that, what my work's affected somebody positively, that's very gratifying. I never, ever believe I change anybody's life. Some speakers will say I'm out changing lives, or somebody will say to me, Mark, your book changed my life, or your speech changed my life. I say, no, you changed your life. I really appreciate the credit you're giving me, but I want to be really clear, outside, faith in God, you're responsible for taking the ideas that you get in this world. And if you implement them from a book or a speaker or a seminar, wherever that is, don't be arrogant about it, but acknowledge the input from others. But I like to be just part of the journey early on, giving people ideas they can use to do business or live better. I'm big on family. My oldest son is a Marine in flight school in Pensacola.
No way.
Yeah,
wow.
He's a second lieutenant. And my younger son's a realtor and a rapper. Rapper and Marine, one of these is not like the other. But I love them both. And, and until your kids get older, I loved being a dad, and my wife loved being a mom at every phase. But it's so much fun to now interact as adults with those little people that hung out in your home for so long. And I just greatly blessed and highly favored. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I am truly grateful for the opportunities God gives me every day, and for the chance to do my best to be a positive influence on others.
I love that. I'm a big man of faith. I'm a big man of faith, and I've always I don't know. I feel like God's always guided me and given me some amazing experiences in my life, and so very much I'm on the same page. And family, it's interesting. I'm not married or have any kids of my own, but I've got a nephew. I've got two nephews, actually. And I was hanging out with them yesterday, and just to see their personalities, to see how they're growing so quickly. It's just incredible. I don't even know how they're learning the stuff that they're learning. My oldest nephew is 2 years old, and he's just discovering all these incredible things about himself, and just finds the joys of spinning. And you never realize how much fun you can actually have spinning around in a circle until you do it with your nephew, Yeah, I'm an adult,
Kids are a great reminder of how easy it is to make your own fun. By the way, Sharon, I didn't get married till I was 37, so you're not that far behind the curve. My oldest, the Marine, I was 39 when he was born, so you still got time.
Look, I got plenty of time. I'm excited. I'm excited for when that person shows up in my life, and it's going to be great. Two more questions. Now we've talked about your joys. What is the thing that makes you afraid the most?
Well, the thing I fear for anyone, myself included, but for our country is people's unwillingness to do serious thinking and just accept as fact opinion and emotion and bromides and tweets and posts that maybe have no basis in reality. Thinking is hard. And if we don't do our own thinking, if we let others think for us, that leads us down a very dangerous path, both individually and collectively as a nation. I also think that, it is easy to forget that your navel isn't the center of the universe. And I know we all, we were all born and imprinted with this desire to survive, and that's a good jumping off point, but it's not a good ending point. And I want to say the difference between leadership and ambition, and I have nothing against ambition. I think I've been a fairly ambitious person, but ambition makes the world better for you, but leadership makes the world better for others. So when I talk about leadership, I always say if you're not benefiting a greater good, you might be a super achiever, but you're probably not truly leading at a higher effective level.
Yeah, I love that. It is interesting how so many of us have become sheeple, and we're basically just blindly following without actually doing some critical thinking over what's actually going on, the serious issues of our day. So I totally concur with that. And the last question before we wrap up, with all of the success and everything that you've had right now, if you could go back in time and visit with the younger Mark Sanborn, the one that's just barely starting to write books, what would you give as a piece of advice to that Mark?
Oh, I've thought about that one a lot. First, I would not work any less hard because I grew up on a farm, and I'm grateful because when you grew up on a farm, nobody asked you if you wanted to work. You just got up and you worked. And so I developed a work ethic. I was lucky to have that opportunity. However, I would tell my younger self, I'm pretty wound tight. I would tell my younger self to stay serious about my work, but take myself less seriously. I wasted too many hairs and too many hours of my life fretting and stewing and obsessing over things that ultimately weren't that big a deal. So, as corny and cliche as it sounds, I'd probably say, hey, work hard, but lighten up.
I love that. And there's a thing I quote that I literally made it up, but I call it relaxed intensity, where it's like intense meaning just like, hey, like have goals, like have, go for it, like have dreams, but be relaxed about it, meaning like, be a little bit more calm. Like don't be like your entire identity is dependent on if such and such outcome happens, right?
I got half of that right. I got the intensity right, but I could have used the relaxed part a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm still working on it, so that's great. Mark, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been so awesome to chat with you about the Fred Factor. And honestly, it's such a great book. It really made me think as well about how I can be a Fred as well in my own life. Not because I want attention or whatever. It's just in my opinion, like a better way to live, just a better way to have life and better way to have love and to be able to share that love. So yeah, thank you so much for your work and for coming on the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Keep up the great work, and I hope we get the chance to talk.
Thank you.
All the best.
Awesome. Thanks again. Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know. Thanks so much and have a great day.